Alien bullies slap the new human teacher and are shocked to discover she's a deadly martial artist. Elena Ward stepped off the small shuttle onto the polished walkway of the Galactic Union Academy, adjusting the strap of her bag. She had expected nervousness, perhaps a few stares, but the sight that met her was something else entirely. The Academy's main courtyard was alive with students of countless species, some tall as trees, others with scales glinting under the artificial lights. They moved with confidence, chatting in a dozen languages, their eyes glinting with curiosity, amusement, or something sharper that Elena could not yet name. Elena's human instincts told her to keep her head down, to observe quietly, but she lifted her chin. After all, she had been invited here as an instructor, not a guest. Her assignment was to teach cultural ethics and interspecies communication, a subject that seemed more delicate than anything she had taught on Earth. Still, she believed humans had a unique way of seeing the world, a perspective that could surprise even the most confident alien minds. Her first day began with a tour of the academy. A drone hovered near her, projecting a holographic map and pointing out lecture halls, dining areas, and recreational spaces. Elena followed politely, noting the architecture, a strange combination of organic curves and metallic angles. It all seemed designed to impress, and it did. Yet there was something else in the air, a sense of social hierarchy that humans weren't used to. She caught glimpses of alien students leaning into each other, whispering, staring at her in ways that suggested they were measuring her, sizing her up. When she entered her first classroom, she noticed immediately who she was dealing with. In the front row sat 3 students, their posture relaxed but their eyes sharp. One of them, a tall, four-armed alien with deep green skin, leaned back and crossed his limbs, smirking in a way that made it clear he considered this class beneath him. The other 2, smaller but still imposing, whispered to each other, occasionally glancing at Elena. She took a deep breath, smoothing the folds of her simple blouse, and greeted the class in her calmest voice. "Good morning, everyone. I am Elena Ward. I will be your instructor for cultural ethics and interspecies communication." Her voice carried easily across the room, clear and steady. The green-skinned student snorted, while the others exchanged amused glances. Elena ignored the laughter and began her introduction. She explained the importance of understanding differences, of recognizing that every species had unique customs and values. She spoke of empathy, respect, and negotiation. Her words were soft but deliberate, her tone patient. She had taught young students before, and she knew how to hold their attention without raising her voice. But the alien students were not so easily impressed. During the first lesson, the green-skinned student who had introduced himself as Krell began whispering to his companions. Elena noticed but continued. Her mind worked quickly, thinking of ways to engage them without confrontation. She invited them to share their perspectives, asking questions that required reasoning rather than strength. Yet the group remained skeptical. By the middle of the lesson, Krell leaned forward and said aloud, loud enough for the class to hear, "Why would a human teach us anything? You are so small and your species is fragile. How can you understand power?" The room froze for a moment. Elena's heart did not race, though a flicker of surprise passed through her. She smiled gently, responding with calm authority. "Humans may appear small or fragile," she said, "but intelligence, strategy, and discipline are also forms of strength. Size is not the only measure of power." She paused, letting her words sink in. The aliens looked skeptical, some shifting in their seats while others smirked as if to test her further. As the days went by, Krell and his friends escalated their behavior. They would move chairs closer to her desk, block her path in hallways, and whisper insults while she lectured. Other students sometimes giggled, but no one intervened. Elena noticed that the academy, despite its reputation for equality, tolerated these behaviors in ways that humans found unusual. Elena responded with patience. She had learned early in life that reaction often fueled aggression. Instead, she remained composed, using body language to assert calm authority rather than confrontation. She smiled when necessary, maintained eye contact, and subtly redirected the attention of the class back to her lessons. She was careful, yet there was a quiet intensity in her movements that suggested she was not to be underestimated. Then came the incident. The class was gathered in a large lecture hall, sunlight streaming through crystalline windows. Elena had been discussing conflict resolution, using examples from Earth cultures. Her voice was soft, her explanation simple. When conflicts arise, understanding each other's motivations is more powerful than responding with force. Krell, clearly bored and looking for attention, leaned forward and without warning slapped Alina across the cheek. The sound echoed through the hall. Every student froze, some gasping audibly. Alina's cheek tingled from the impact, but she did not flinch. She paused, took a slow breath, and adjusted her glasses. "Was that an educational demonstration?" she asked, her voice calm, almost gentle. The question hung in the air. Krell opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The room was silent, tension stretching tight like a wire. No one had expected her to respond so quietly, so composedly. Alina straightened her posture and addressed the class. "At this academy, we are all here to learn. Actions like this violate our shared respect. However, it provides an opportunity to learn something even more important." Her eyes, steady and unwavering, met Krell's. "If anyone wishes, I can demonstrate how humans handle aggression safely without causing harm." The suggestion drew laughter from some students. Krell grinned, confident that a human could not possibly demonstrate anything meaningful against him. The arbiter, a tall, winged alien who oversaw student conduct, nodded slowly. "Very well," he said. "Show us then. Let's see what humans can do." Alina stood in the center of the hall, her movements measured. She explained that humans had developed techniques over millennia to protect themselves, techniques that relied on balance, precision, and control rather than brute force. She invited Krell to approach. Krell stepped forward, arms crossed, clearly expecting an easy victory. Alina's eyes followed his movements, noting his center of gravity, the way he shifted weight from limb to limb. When he lunged toward her, not aggressively, but certainly with confidence, Alina shifted slightly, redirecting his momentum with a small, careful movement. Krell stumbled forward, caught himself, and glared. The demonstration continued. Alina moved with grace, guiding Krell's energy without striking, using minimal force to maintain control. She adjusted her stance, shifted her weight, and guided him to the ground in a way that was precise but not painful. The class watched, astonished, as their assumptions about humans began to crumble. Other students leaned forward, whispering, their eyes wide. Alina invited a second volunteer and then a third. Each time she demonstrated the same principle. Humans could neutralize aggression without hurting others, relying on intelligence, timing, and control. By the end of the session, the atmosphere in the hall had changed. The aliens who had laughed before now watched in quiet respect. Krell sat on the floor, rubbing his pride more than his body, while Alina straightened, calm and composed. The arbiter approached, nodding slowly. "It seems humans are not as weak as many believe," he said. Alina smiled, soft but confident. "Strength takes many forms," she said simply, "and sometimes the strongest action is restraint." The class ended shortly after. Students left quietly, their chatter subdued. Krell lingered for a moment, then muttered a reluctant acknowledgement before departing. Alina gathered her notes, her calm demeanor unbroken. She had proven a point, not through anger, not through force, but through skill, patience, and the human capacity for disciplined control. As she walked back to her quarters, Alina reflected on the day. Humanity had a reputation for cleverness, ingenuity, and resilience. Here, on a distant academy among alien species, she had reminded them that humans were not to be underestimated. Strength was not only in muscle or size. It was in the mind, in training, and in the quiet, unshakable control that humans could wield. And tomorrow, she knew, the lesson would continue. The next morning, the Galactic Union Academy hummed with a different energy. Word of Alina Ward's demonstration had spread quickly. Students whispered in hallways, eyes darting toward her classroom as she walked to her lecture hall. Some looked curious, others cautious. Even the faculty seemed to glance her way with a new respect, though none said it aloud. Alina noticed it all with quiet awareness. She had expected this. Humans had a reputation for cleverness, for finding strength in unexpected places, and today she would build on that impression. She carried her usual calm demeanor, smiling politely at anyone who nodded or greeted her. To most, she appeared serene, even fragile, but anyone who looked closely could sense the discipline that lay beneath. Her first class of the day began with Krell and his two companions sitting in the front row. Their previous arrogance had been dampened, replaced with something closer to caution. They whispered among themselves, glancing at Alina now with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. She welcomed them with the same calm tone she used every day. "Good morning," she said. "Today, we will continue exploring ways to handle conflict without harm. Yesterday, some of you saw what humans can do with patience and control. Today, we will see how these principles apply to teamwork, problem-solving, and everyday life." The students listened, some leaning forward. Elena began with a series of simple exercises, asking pairs to coordinate movements to achieve a goal without touching one another. They laughed at first, unsure of what she meant, but soon realized that the challenge required focus, observation, and subtle communication. Even Krell's group struggled at first, fumbling and bumping into each other. Elena guided them gently, offering small corrections that made a big difference. Then came the next phase. Elena explained a principle humans had refined over centuries: anticipation. "We cannot control what others will do," she said, "but we can control how we respond. By observing carefully, we can redirect energy, avoid harm, and achieve our goals efficiently." She asked Krell to demonstrate a mock approach again, but this time she would involve the entire front row. The alien students looked doubtful. There were 4 in the group now, each larger than her, each confident that a human could not handle them all. Elena invited them forward one by one. She moved with a calm precision, guiding their momentum rather than resisting it. When one stepped too quickly, she gently shifted their balance, causing them to stumble without touching them aggressively. The others hesitated, realizing that their assumptions about humans were flawed. Elena smiled as she observed. This was not about showing off strength. It was about showing the power of intelligence, strategy, and self-discipline. Each alien student learned quickly that human skill was subtle but effective. They could not rely on size, speed, or brute confidence. They had to think, adjust, and pay attention. After several rounds, the classroom atmosphere had changed completely. The front row that had once laughed and mocked now looked at Elena with careful attention. Their whispers turned to questions. Krell, who had once been the loudest and most dismissive, asked, "How do you know where to move? How do you always anticipate?" Elena considered her response. "Experience teaches you patterns, observation teaches you details, and patience teaches you timing. Humans are not always the strongest, but we have learned to make our minds and our bodies work together." The students nodded slowly. Some took notes, others watched her every movement. Elena knew that the lesson was more than physical demonstration, it was about respect. The aliens were learning that humans deserved it, not because they could dominate, but because they could master themselves. By midday, the hallways were buzzing. Students who had never spoken to her now paused to greet her politely. Some of the younger aliens mimicked the exercises she had taught, laughing at their own awkwardness but enjoying the challenge. The reputation of humans was quietly shifting. In her afternoon class, Elena invited a larger group to participate in a collaborative exercise. She divided them into teams and asked them to solve a series of challenges requiring cooperation, strategy, and subtle manipulation of objects without physical conflict. The aliens initially struggled. They were used to relying on strength, intimidation, and quick reaction. Now they had to coordinate, plan, and adapt. Elena guided them through each step. She gave hints, offered encouragement, and corrected mistakes gently. The students began to see patterns. Communication became smoother. Confidence shifted from bluster to thoughtfulness. By the end of the session, even Krell admitted that the humans' approach had advantages the aliens had never considered. As the day drew to a close, Elena gathered her notes and looked over the quiet classroom. The students were exhausted but engaged, and many were eager to continue learning. She felt a deep satisfaction. This was exactly why she had come. Humans had a different kind of power, one built on discipline, observation, and clever thinking. The aliens might be stronger in muscle, faster in reflex, but humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast them without ever causing harm. Word of her classes spread beyond the walls of the academy. Other instructors observed discreetly, noting her calm control and innovative teaching methods. Some had assumed humans were weak and timid, but Elena's example showed a different truth. Humans could adapt, teach, and lead through intelligence, strategy, and self-control. Later, as she returned to her quarters, Krell and his friends approached her. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity, respect, and lingering doubt. Krell spoke first, his tone quieter than usual. You handle things differently than anyone I've met." I thought humans were weak. I was wrong. Elena smiled softly. Strength is not always what it seems. Sometimes it is quiet, measured, and controlled. That is why humans survive and why we can teach others to survive too. He nodded slowly, then glanced at his friends. We want to learn more. Can you teach us? Of course, Elena replied. Learning is the first step to understanding, and understanding is the first step to respect. Over the following weeks, the dynamic at the academy shifted subtly but noticeably. Students who had once teased or ignored her now sought her guidance. They listened attentively, practiced exercises, and even helped younger or less confident classmates. The alien students began to see that human strength was not about striking, but about control, intelligence, and timing. Elena's lessons expanded beyond physical techniques. She incorporated problem-solving challenges, logic exercises, and strategic games that required teamwork and careful observation. Students learned that success often came from thinking ahead, observing carefully, and adapting quickly. Humans had developed these skills over countless generations, and now the aliens were starting to understand their value. Krell, once the loudest and most aggressive, became her most eager student. He approached every exercise thoughtfully, asking questions, taking notes, and even helping others improve. The classroom that had once echoed with mocking laughter now buzzed with genuine engagement. By the end of the term, Elena had accomplished more than she could have hoped. She had shifted perceptions, not through confrontation or punishment, but through example, teaching, and quiet mastery. Humans were no longer just fragile intellectuals in the eyes of the academy. They were capable, disciplined, and profoundly effective. One afternoon, as the academy's daily activities wound down, the arbiter called Elena to his office. He looked at her with newfound respect. "Your methods are unusual," he said, "but effective. You have changed more minds in a few weeks than most instructors do in years." Elena nodded calmly. "I only hope that what they have learned will help them in life, not just in the classroom. Strength is valuable, but understanding it is what makes it lasting." The arbiter smiled. "It seems humans have more to teach us than we realized." Elena left his office, walking down the corridors that were now filled with students practicing the techniques she had taught. She felt a quiet pride. This was what humans did best: adapt, observe, learn, and teach. They had turned a moment of disrespect into an opportunity for growth. And in doing so, they had reshaped the academy's understanding of strength, discipline, and respect. As she looked at the students working together, she knew that the lesson extended beyond any single demonstration. Humans had a reputation for subtle, controlled power, and now even the alien students understood it. Elena smiled softly to herself. Humanity had shown once again that strength was not measured by size, speed, or force, but by the mind, the heart, and the unwavering control to act wisely when challenged. And in the Galactic Union Academy, that lesson would be remembered for a long time. The weeks passed at the Galactic Union Academy with an unusual energy. Elena Ward's presence had changed the academy in ways no one had expected. Students whispered her name with respect rather than amusement, and even the most confident aliens were careful not to underestimate her. The lessons had gone beyond physical demonstration. They had evolved into discussions about discipline, problem-solving, and understanding others' perspectives. Humans, it seemed, had a subtle strength that could not be measured by muscle alone. Elena entered her classroom early one morning, carrying her notes and a small device for projecting holographic scenarios. She smiled at the students already gathering, some practicing quietly, others reading in groups. She had planned today's lesson carefully. It would be a challenge that tested not only coordination and balance, but also critical thinking, patience, and teamwork, the hallmarks of human ingenuity. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice calm and warm. "Today, we will combine everything we have learned. You will work together in teams to solve challenges that require observation, strategy, and control. Remember, the goal is not to win through force, but to succeed through understanding." The students looked intrigued. Krell and his companions were in the front row, eyes bright with anticipation. They had learned a great deal from Elena's previous lessons, but she had hinted that today would be different. Elena activated the holographic projector. A three-dimensional maze appeared in the center of the room, its walls shimmering and shifting. "This is your challenge," she explained. You must guide your team through the maze, avoid obstacles, and reach the goal. Communication and observation are more important than speed. You may not touch the walls or interfere with another team's path. The students leaned forward, studying the maze carefully. It was complex, filled with twists, turns, and hidden passages. Some of the younger aliens hesitated, unsure how to approach it. Alina moved among them, offering gentle guidance. Observe carefully, anticipate the moves of your teammates, adjust your plan as you go. Patience is just as important as speed. The challenge began. Teams moved cautiously, whispering instructions, pointing out passages, and guiding each other through the shifting walls. Krell's team initially struggled, moving too quickly and making mistakes. Alina watched calmly, intervening only when necessary. She reminded them to slow down, to watch one another, and to communicate clearly. Gradually, the teams adapted. Students who had once relied on force or instinct now used thought, observation, and strategy. They learned to anticipate the maze's movements, to guide their teammates with subtle signals, and to correct mistakes before they became serious. Alina's human methods, patience, careful observation, and quiet control had transformed the alien students' approach to problem-solving. As the exercise progressed, something remarkable happened. Students began helping each other across teams. They shared insights, warned of upcoming obstacles, and offered encouragement. The competition had turned into collaboration, a lesson Alina had hoped they would discover. Humans did not thrive alone. They thrived by observing, adapting, and supporting one another. Krell approached Alina quietly after the exercise. "I did not think humans could teach us so much," he admitted. "We are stronger, faster, and more confident, but you have shown us something we cannot achieve with size or speed alone." Alina smiled. "Strength is more than physical. It is understanding, patience, and the ability to act wisely. Humans have learned to survive in ways that rely on all of these qualities. Now you are beginning to see the value in that approach." The afternoon brought a new lesson. Alina introduced a puzzle that required both mental acuity and coordination. Students had to manipulate holographic objects to create a stable structure while following strict rules. It was difficult, and some aliens grew frustrated, accustomed to relying on instinct or force. Alina encouraged them gently, demonstrating a calm approach to problem-solving. "Observe the pieces," she said. "Notice how they fit together. Do not rush. Each movement matters, but so does understanding the pattern. Success comes from careful thought, not speed." The students began to work more deliberately. They paused, discussed options, and tested hypotheses before acting. Mistakes were corrected quickly and calmly, with guidance from Alina rather than criticism. Slowly, structures began to take shape, stable and balanced, as teams learned to combine strategy, observation, and patience. By the end of the day, the students were exhausted but exhilarated. They had learned more than just exercises or puzzles. They had discovered a human approach to challenges, careful observation, teamwork, and thoughtful action. Alina's lessons had instilled not fear or dominance, but respect and admiration. Word of Alina's teaching reached the Academy Council. They called her to present her methods to other instructors, eager to understand the human approach. Alina demonstrated the exercises, guiding the council members through challenges that required focus, patience, and cooperation. Even the most skeptical alien instructors were impressed by the effectiveness of her methods. "Your methods are remarkable," said one of the council members, a four-winged alien who had once doubted humans. "We assumed humans were weak, unfit for our environments, but you have shown a different kind of strength, one that is subtle, intelligent, and lasting." Alina nodded calmly. "Strength takes many forms. Humans have learned to survive and thrive not through brute force, but through observation, discipline, and understanding. These qualities are valuable for everyone, regardless of species." The demonstration left a lasting impression. Instructors began incorporating Alina's methods into their own classes. The academy slowly shifted its culture, valuing patience, collaboration, and thoughtful problem-solving as much as physical strength or natural abilities. Humans, once underestimated, had shown that intelligence and discipline could shape even the most competitive environment. Meanwhile, in her daily classes, Alina noticed a subtle change in her students. Krell and his companions had become leaders among their peers, not through dominance but through guidance and support. They encouraged others to practice, to observe, and to think carefully. The classroom, once filled with laughter at a human's expense, now buzzed with curiosity, collaboration, and quiet admiration. One day, Alina introduced a scenario that tested everything the students had learned. A simulated emergency required teams to coordinate, communicate, and act quickly without panicking. Students applied her methods, combining strategy, observation, and cooperation. They navigated the challenge successfully, surprising even themselves. Alina watched with satisfaction. Humans had shown a path that was not about overpowering others, but about mastering oneself, observing carefully, and acting wisely. The aliens had learned to value these qualities, understanding that true strength often lay in restraint and insight rather than force. Krell approached Alina afterward, his expression thoughtful. "I understand now," he said. "Humans do not need to dominate to succeed. You have taught us that thinking, patience, and control are stronger than raw strength. I will not forget this." Alina smiled gently. "That is all I hope for. Learning to act wisely and to understand others is a lesson that lasts far longer than any victory won by force." As the term drew to a close, the academy had transformed in small but meaningful ways. Students were more considerate, collaborative, and observant. The culture of intimidation had faded, replaced by one that valued skill, intelligence, and thoughtful action. Alina's presence had reminded them that humans, despite appearances, were a species of remarkable resilience and subtle power. One evening, as Alina walked through the quiet halls, she paused to observe the students practicing exercises together. They moved with careful coordination, helping each other, correcting mistakes, and applying lessons she had taught. She felt a quiet pride, knowing that her efforts had not only changed the classroom but had begun to influence the academy's culture. Her thoughts turned to Earth, to the lessons humans had learned over countless generations. Survival, adaptation, and cooperation had shaped her species into one capable of thriving in difficult circumstances. Here, among alien peers, she had demonstrated that those same lessons could inspire others, teaching them that true strength was not always visible, but it was always powerful. Alina knew her journey at the academy was far from over. There would be new challenges, new students, and new situations that tested her patience and skill. But she felt confident. Humans had a way of rising to challenges, of turning adversity into opportunity. She would continue to teach, to guide, and to demonstrate that intelligence, discipline, and respect were among the most potent forces in the galaxy. As she prepared her notes for the next day, Alina smiled to herself. Humanity had once again proven that strength was not always measured in size or speed. It was measured in the mind, the heart, and the calm control to act wisely when faced with challenges. And in the halls of the Galactic Union Academy, that lesson would echo for generations. The new term began with an air of excitement that Alina could feel the moment she stepped onto the academy grounds. The students moved with purpose, talking quietly in small groups about what they had learned from her lessons. Some were practicing coordination exercises in the courtyard, carefully observing one another, while others discussed strategies for problem-solving challenges. Even Krell and his companions seemed transformed. Gone was the arrogance of the past. They now approached her with attentiveness and curiosity, ready to learn rather than to test or mock. Alina smiled to herself. The progress was evident, but she knew that true mastery was not achieved in weeks alone. Discipline, observation, and understanding were skills that had to be practiced continuously. Today, she planned a series of exercises that would challenge the students in entirely new ways. The first lesson began in a large simulation hall. Alina projected a holographic landscape, one that shifted subtly with time. "Today, we will practice adaptability," she explained. "The environment changes around us, and success depends on how quickly we notice changes and adjust. Observe, anticipate, and cooperate." The students leaned forward, their eyes wide with anticipation. Some had grown used to her calm voice and measured instructions, but today, the shifting landscape introduced uncertainty. Paths would appear and disappear, obstacles would move, and decisions had to be made quickly yet carefully. Alina divided the students into teams, making sure each team included a mix of species. She emphasized that strength or speed alone would not guarantee success. Teamwork, patience, and observation would be the keys to navigating the challenge. Krell's team looked at each other, nodding silently as if they understood the stakes without further explanation. The exercise began. Students moved carefully, studying the shifting landscape and coordinating with their teammates. Mistakes were frequent at first. Some teams hesitated too long, while others acted impulsively. Elena walked among them, offering guidance and subtle corrections. She demonstrated how small adjustments in movement and timing could prevent errors without conflict. As the session continued, the students adapted. They learned to anticipate the movement of the landscape and to communicate quietly yet effectively. Even Krell, who had once relied on bravado, now directed his teammates calmly, guiding them through obstacles with clear instructions and encouragement. By midday, the students had begun to understand the deeper lesson Elena was teaching. The shifting environment was a metaphor for life, she explained. Conditions change, challenges appear unexpectedly, and strength alone is rarely enough. Success comes from understanding, adapting, and cooperating. Humans had survived for millennia not because they were the strongest, but because they had mastered these principles. The second part of the day introduced a puzzle that combined physical movement with intellectual problem-solving. A series of holographic objects required careful arrangement to form a functional pattern. The students had to plan, observe, and adjust their approach without disrupting other teams' progress. It was a challenge that demanded attention, patience, and collaboration. At first, the aliens struggled. Their natural inclination was to act quickly and rely on instinct. Elena encouraged them gently, demonstrating how small, thoughtful adjustments could lead to greater success than brute force. Slowly, the teams began to work together, discussing strategies, testing ideas, and supporting one another. Krell's team, once the most impatient, had become the most coordinated. They paused to observe each move, communicated clearly, and adjusted their strategy in response to mistakes. Elena watched with quiet satisfaction as they applied the lessons they had learned over the past weeks. As the exercise concluded, Elena gathered the students. "Today, you have practiced adaptability, observation, and cooperation," she said. "These are the qualities that humans have used to survive and thrive. Remember, strength alone is not enough. Wisdom, patience, and careful action are equally important." The students listened attentively. Even those who had been skeptical at the beginning of the term now nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. Humans, small and seemingly fragile, had developed strategies that allowed them to face challenges far greater than their physical abilities. Later that afternoon, Elena organized a collaborative exercise that spanned the entire academy courtyard. Teams had to move objects, solve puzzles, and complete a series of challenges while maintaining clear communication and coordination. The exercise required focus, patience, and careful observation. The courtyard buzzed with energy. Students called out instructions, adjusted their movements, and guided one another through the tasks. Mistakes were corrected calmly, without frustration or blame. Elena moved among them, offering encouragement and subtle guidance. She demonstrated that mistakes were not failures but opportunities to learn and improve. By the end of the day, the students were exhausted but exhilarated. They had learned more than just techniques or exercises. They had experienced the human approach to challenges: observation, adaptability, patience, and teamwork. Even Krell admitted, quietly but sincerely, that humans were more capable than he had ever imagined. The following week, Elena introduced a scenario that simulated real-life problem-solving under pressure. Teams had to respond to unexpected changes in their environment, coordinating to achieve goals without conflict. The challenge required clear communication, quick thinking, and cooperation. At first, there was confusion. The students were unsure how to respond to the shifting conditions. Elena observed silently, then offered guidance, demonstrating subtle techniques to maintain control and adapt to changes. Slowly, the teams learned to anticipate shifts, communicate effectively, and work together to achieve their objectives. The exercise revealed another truth about humans. They thrived under uncertainty. Where other species relied on strength, instinct, or predictable routines, humans used observation, planning, and adaptability to succeed. The students began to appreciate this, realizing that human methods were not only effective but also respectful and efficient. As the term progressed, Elena noticed a change in the culture of the academy. Students who had once relied on dominance or intimidation now emphasized communication, observation, and cooperation. Mistreatment or mockery of other species became rare, replaced by assistance, encouragement, and shared problem-solving. Humans, through their example, had subtly reshaped the social norms of the academy. Alina's influence extended beyond the classroom. Other instructors began observing her methods, asking questions, and incorporating her techniques into their own teaching. The Academy Council recognized her contributions, praising her for demonstrating that intelligence, discipline, and patience were as powerful as physical strength. One afternoon, as the students practiced a complex exercise involving coordination and strategy, Krell approached Alina. "I want to thank you," he said quietly. "I have learned more from you than I ever expected. Humans may not be the strongest, but you have shown us a way to succeed without harming others. That is something we will not forget." Alina smiled. "That is the purpose of learning, to grow, to adapt, and to use knowledge wisely. Strength is not only measured in power, but in how wisely we apply it." The day ended with a reflective discussion. Alina encouraged students to share what they had learned, how they had applied human methods to challenges, and how they could continue to use these principles in the future. The conversation was lively, thoughtful, and respectful. Students exchanged ideas, strategies, and insights, recognizing the value of observation, patience, and careful planning. As evening fell, Alina walked through the academy gardens, observing students practicing quietly, collaborating, and reflecting on their lessons. She felt a quiet pride. Humans, small and seemingly fragile, had demonstrated a strength that was invisible but profound. They had shown that true power came not from dominance, but from understanding, discipline, and thoughtful action. Her thoughts turned to the broader universe. Humanity's history had been one of adaptation, innovation, and survival in the face of challenges far greater than themselves. Here, among alien peers, Alina had demonstrated that these qualities could inspire others, teaching them that intelligence, patience, and cooperation were universal strengths. As she returned to her quarters, Alina prepared her notes for the next day. She planned new exercises, challenges that would further test observation, adaptability, and teamwork. She knew that the students had made great progress, but she also understood that mastery required ongoing practice and reflection. That night, as the academy quieted, Alina reflected on her journey. Humans had once been underestimated, judged by size, speed, or apparent fragility. Yet they had survived, thrived, and taught others to see the value in qualities that were not always visible. Discipline, intelligence, patience, and understanding, these were strengths that transcended species, and she had shown them to the students of the Galactic Union Academy. Alina smiled softly. She had planted a seed of respect, understanding, and collaboration that would grow long after her term ended. Humanity's subtle strength had made its mark, demonstrating that true power lies not in dominance, but in mastery of oneself and the ability to guide others wisely. And in the academy, the lesson of the quiet human teacher would echo for generations to come.